Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Garvey. I'm the chairman of BBF, and it's my great pleasure to be speaking to Graeme Dell today from Cableflow in this latest series of our Talking Heads podcast. So, Graeme, hello.
Michael, hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good to see you. So we first met only very recently, didn't we, at the business leaders lunch in Marlow, and it was fascinating for me to hear the journey your business has been on. So we're going to focus on Cableflow as a business during this podcast, the journey, sort of the excellent track record of exporting, the development of innovation and technology in the healthcare sector, and of course your three very significant awards. I won't steal your thunder, though. I'll let you tell the listeners about those in a little bit. So firstly, tell me a bit more about Cableflow.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well, look, we're a business. We started back in 1989. It was one of those light bulb moments where I kind of got a bit cheesed off working for the people that I was working for. Realised that as a relatively young person as I was in those days, and certainly with hair, that there was opportunity out there. So 1989, we started up as a fledgling startup under what was then the government's business expansion scheme. That's now been replaced by the Enterprise Investment Scheme for any investors that are listening, the EIS. But the principle of that scheme was to have investment within entrepreneurial startups. And by the way, I hate the word entrepreneur. Certainly when you're having lunch with somebody and you ask them what they do and they tell you, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not quite sure what that exactly means. But for us, it was a way, and it was a tax investment scheme set up by HMRC where wealthy investors could invest in startups and get a tax benefit of that if they kept the money in over a certain period of time. But as you can probably imagine with schemes like that, after that certain period of time has ended, then those investors want to take the money away and disappear. And as a consequence of that, we're now today, as we sit here 36 years further on, we reflect perhaps less than 1% of those original startups back in those days that are still operating. So we certainly buck the trend. But as I said, I had a vision, I had an idea, and those ideas have started and over time have evolved into lots of different ideas. The vision has remained the same, and that's primarily been to develop and provide product that will resolve uncertainties in the marketplace, certainly in the healthcare sector, to give a provision within the healthcare environment to assist those who are perhaps less capable to assist themselves, but also to assist the clinicians in helping those who are less able to help themselves and to make the environments a nicer place to work in. Our offer is very unique. It's a very narrow bandwidth of competition that we have in the UK. But we have a standard product offer that's evolved over 36 years to from being effectively what was a one-trick pony to a multi-trick pony with lots of different options. And the bit probably that sets us aside in the marketplace now is the ability to develop bespoke solutions for end users, whether that's NHS schemes or indeed the private healthcare provisions. We have a concept within the business that we have a product from entry to exit on the patient journey. So from the moment a patient may well go into a triage area to the moment they may well get discharged, and they've been on that journey. Sometimes it's within a matter of hours. Other times it's within a matter of days, weeks, or even months as well. We design and manufacture the containment product that screws onto the wall. Conventionally, you'll see a socket outlet plumbed into the wall in a conventional fashion, but in healthcare facilities, that doesn't offer the ability for flexibility, adaptability, and updating. So we design and manufacture the enclosures that provide all of the patient care services, whether it's med gas, nurse call, lighting control, patient monitoring, mains power, all the bits that you need at the clinical bed space to get somebody better, in simple
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah, so I think, as you said earlier, it's quite a sort of narrow product range, although it's got sort of uh, more elegant over the years. But how did you come up with the concept? What made you? Because it's interesting. You were talking about entrepreneurs, and actually, we've long said in Buckinghamshire, we are the entrepreneurial heart of the UK. There are more startups in Buckinghamshire than any other county traditionally. So we are the classic small business environment. We know that 91% of our businesses employ fewer than 10 people. So So it is a hotbed of startups in innovation and entrepreneurship. So what was the entrepreneurial journey for you and the business that spotted that niche in the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, going back a few decades now, without giving too much away, I'd sold nurse call systems as a really young sales rep effectively. But those systems are sold by companies who also sold the containment product to put those nurse call systems in. A bit by contrast in export markets where they tend to be sold by the medical gas contractors, as an example. But I saw that there was a niche. I saw that, these were products which were from the bedhead containment products. They were a means to an end to accommodate the nurse call system and not really designed specifically as a product in their own right. So we recognised that, and as a startup, saw that as an opportunity to get into the market as a standalone company where anybody's nurse call system or anybody's medical gas or anybody's power outlets could be mounted into a product rather than somebody selling a different component that was dictating what that product would be. But that wasn't as easy to get into as we first thought. And in fact, we had lots of challenges, not least of all that many of those nurse call manufacturers kind of saw that we were going to nick their market, and didn't want to work with us. They come up with all different excuses. But as sometimes it's the challenge is a bit about unlocking the door. In other cases, it's not always knowing that there's a door there to unlock. So you've got to create the door. And we knew that we had something that was right, and it was a case of biding our time really, because we knew at some stage there was going to be a project that would come along that would say, we want to use this Cableflow product. If you want to put your nurse call system in it or your medical gas system, you're going to have to work with them. And that's exactly what happened. And from that, we've never really looked back. There were lots of challenges along the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a few moments. But in simplistic terms, it was an idea. It was that light bulb moment, as happens in many SMEs and many startups. But then it was having the backbone to say, I believe in this, but more importantly, having other people to say, we believe in it as well, and that was private investors at the time. And I guess in hindsight, Michael, now looking back, saying we believe in you, Graeme. We believe in what you stand for. We believe in your skill sets. We believe in your idea, and we're prepared to support you. And I think often that gets forgotten about.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, actually, which is that sort of symbiotic relationship between obviously the person and the business. I always have a saying within my business is that people only ever employ people. So although my business is a firm of commercial property consultants, and it might act for a company of widget makers because they've got a particular property problem, it's a person that employs a person ultimately, and therefore that ability to get on with people, to be resilient, and I guess you've probably had to be, by the sounds of things, very resilient in the early days in terms of the knockbacks. So what advice would you give? Because hopefully some of the people listening to this will be budding entrepreneurs, people thinking about starting a business. What's the golden nugget you would give them that you've learned along the way about just persistence, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the first one is resilience. And I think with that comes to belief. It reminds me a little bit about my daughter the other day. She was doing something at school, and I said to her that you're floundering a bit here because you don't know what you're reciting. So if you get absolutely spot on with what you're reciting, with that will come confidence. And I think that's the same in business. I think that if you understand what you're doing, you're confident in what you're doing, and you're knowledge based in what you're doing. And a lot of that is about learning. And that becomes harder as we get older, because I think a lot of people don't think we need to learn anymore, but every day's a learning day. It's about knowing your subject matter. It's about knowing what you're talking about and having the confidence. And, one of the big challenges that we had in coming into the market, and I go back to, there'll be listeners, I'm sure, that will remember the much lauded but also much criticised private finance initiative in building hospitals, going back to the start of the Blair government, where they decided to build 100 new super hospitals under private finance, and basically private finance build them and lease them back to the NHS. And for that, we had to develop a specific product. It's one of the products in our showroom. But the challenge was that none of the regulation and standards allowed us to manufacture or sell that product. So we had to go on a journey with innovation and change the standards and convince people that this standard no longer worked. It was out of date, and you're stifling innovation and you're stifling improvement. But that takes confidence, but it also takes belief in what you're doing as well. And I think as a fledgling startup, it's about knowing that you have that belief in yourself. It's knowing that you have the belief in your concept. And it's very different, I think, in terms of service providers versus product manufacturers or product providers. There's a very different approach to market with that. But certainly, when you're starting out on that journey, it's knowing not necessarily where you want to be. I think we all know where we want to be, but we don't necessarily know that roadmap. And I have a bit of paper in my desk. In fact, I have several bits of paper in my desk in the side file that have been with me since day one. And I had a set of goals, a set of ambitions. And as I achieved them, I crossed them off. And I had something else, I put it on. And that's grown over, well, I've been 36 years now. Some things are still there from the very early days that have not yet been achieved or attained. But that's about the vision. It's about understanding what you want to do, and understanding as well that what you wanted to do on day one might and probably will be very different on day 5, year 10, year 15, year 20.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about adaptability, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you can have, I think that's a very good analogy. You can have your roadmap, but like going on any journey, sometimes you encounter, a traffic jam, some roadworks, and you have to divert. And then you have to rethink your route, but you're still planning on getting to the destination. You're just going in a slightly different way that's forced upon you sometimes, or occasionally, you can choose to go a different way because you've realized that actually there's a different, a more effective, productive way of doing something. So adaptability is important, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think the other word that I would use very frequently here is courage. It takes a very courageous person to recognize, certainly in business, certainly when finances are at play, to realize that actually I've got this wrong. I need to go back a few stages, or I need to take a left turn here, to turn right again, to get back onto the track, to navigate that obstacle. And you need courage to do that. It's the courage of the convictions to make a change, because no roadmap is the same for two businesses, for two people. And the journey will hit speed bumps, it will hit brick walls, and you've got to navigate around them. And that's where it comes back to the resilience and the belief in what you're doing.
No, but I agree. I think, strong leadership is knowing when something's not working, being sort of able to say it isn't working, I chose poorly, or I didn't know all of the facts. We're going to start again. We're going to go a different way. I think that is real leadership. So that's a fascinating journey that you've been on. And as you say, you've gone from this sort of fledgling startup and now to having significant export business, and of course an award-winning export business. So tell us a bit about those awards, which you must be incredibly proud of. And then I think we'll go into talking about the challenges for exporting. Obviously, how you grow a business from a local, regional, national marketplace into an international one, because that's the holy grail for a lot of manufacturing businesses in particular, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and look, thanks for recognising that. The journey that we've been on, I was taught a very long time ago that you do things that get recognised, not do things to be recognised. And when I go back to the vision of what we had, which was about improving patient care and helping people, has all been about innovation. It's all been about developing things. And that example that I gave you, where I had to go out and change both national and international standards, at British standards, at ISO, at CENILEC, at CEN, around the product innovation that we had way back in the days. As a consequence of that, we were incredibly successful across the PFI schemes within healthcare. And we were granted by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth a Queen's Award for Enterprise in 2005. And I'm still trying not to smile when I say that, because I go back.
And you should smile, and you should be very proud of it.
We beam. And that was transitional for us as a business. And we carried on, and we kept doing what we were doing. And then in 2023, we were granted one of the first King's Awards by His Majesty the King, again for innovation. And again in 2024, so back-to-back successes, a further grant in 24 for international trade, for the growth of our export footprint over a sustained period of time. And there's an intrinsic link, of course, between innovation and international trade. I'm absolutely convinced about that. But we're incredibly proud of all of those accolades that we received. I mean, a King's Award for Enterprise, as they now are, it's the highest business accolade that can be bestowed upon any business in the UK, seen by many as a corporate knighthood. But not only have you got to do something special to be granted an award, but you've then got to uphold the concept of and the credibility of the accolade. And I think that's what we aspire to every day within our business and our people, is to uphold the confidence that's been placed in us, not just by His Majesty the King, but also by government and all the different agencies that decide upon these grants, to say that you're amongst the best businesses in the UK. You operate in an appropriate manner. You've got good governance and regulatory credentials. You have a green footprint in what you're doing, and all the different elements that come with a King's Award. We aspire to be better than that award every single day in what we're doing.
Yeah, and as you said, you're an ambassador now, aren't you, for the nation, really, in this area of work that's so important. And you've got to lead by example. And I think a winning award like that is real fuel, isn't it, to sort of keep going. And we all like recognition, don't we? And to be recognised, I think, is real fuel to keep going, to look out for the next opportunity. So what's next for Cableflow then? I mean, without giving any secrets away, is there a big project on the horizon?
Well, look, within the area of work that we have a standard product range, we have bespoke product ranges, but we're as good as the last project, and projects come and go. For us, we can start work on a project today, and we might not come to an order for 5 years. There might be a big evolution in that process. So we're managing lots of different projects, lots of different schemes, and lots of different products. For us, it's still very much business as usual every day. For us, we continue to innovate. We have a strong R&D program in what we're doing. In many cases, that's clients contacting us and saying, look, can you work with us on something? We've got an idea, or we like that, we don't quite like this about that. Can you make something a bit different? So we've got schemes that are going. For us, it's very much been since COVID, and COVID was transitional for many businesses, not least of us in healthcare. I mean, at COVID, Michael, we didn't lose a day in manufacturing. We were double shifting right the way through, almost for a 2-year period. We cocooned ourselves and that of the supply chain, but it almost made us realise to a greater degree than perhaps we thought how relevant we were, not just to a UK market, but to a global market as well. Yeah. So our horizons now are not just about growing in the UK as we've done continually year on year, but also on our export footprint as a consequence of the export work that we're doing. So I'm an export champion for the Department of Business and Trade, helping other businesses on their export journey. That might be a brand new journey. It might be a journey that they're on, but they've got some challenges, so they want a bit of advice to help and promote everything that's great about British manufacturing. And that comes from experience. It comes perhaps from a different lens to what they're looking at it from. It comes from experience in markets where we or I as an individual have succeeded and indeed failed, to try and help others to clarify what their vision and mission is in terms of export.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think your failures can be just as educational as your successes, can't they?
Well, they can if you recognise that failure is part of the journey. I think this is a real learning that every success starts with that willingness to try. But the willingness to try has to accept that along the way, a bit like those road bumps that we spoke about a short while ago, every willingness to try has to come with an acceptance that you're probably going to fail at some stage.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting, actually. We talk about King's Award on this, and let me do a bit of a tangent and come back. But as part of the King's Awards success, you get invited to a reception hosted by His Majesty. And in 2024, I went to one at Windsor Castle, and I was chatting away to a guy, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, how many times have you applied for the King's Award?" And I said, 3 times. He said, "Oh, right." He said, "You must be really pleased with winning one this time around." I said, "Well, actually, we won 3."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, how many times have you applied?" And I said, 3 times. I said, "What about you?" He said, "Oh, this is our 9th time. It took us 9 times." And I said, "So why have you been resilient?" He said, "Well, we just learn each time in that application process."
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example about success and running a business, that you've got to be prepared for the failures as much as you want to succeed in every occasion. But we won't be amazed, because I think we've been on that journey, Michael, in our own business lives, that a lot of people in business expect it just to be plain sailing and succeed, and the failures won't be that great. Failing is part of that journey, and encouraging, actually actively encouraging people to fail. And we do it with our people, my colleagues within the business, is have a go, see whether it works. If it doesn't work, what have you lost? But if you don't try, you're not going to know.
No, it's interesting. There's always a fear about failure.
Yeah.
Actually, if you accept that failure is an inevitable part of progress, putting a man on the moon just didn't happen seamlessly. They had plenty of failures, for example, in rocket propulsion technology. But you've just got to accept it's a learning opportunity. You can take something from it and you can adapt. We were talking about resilience and adaptability, weren't we, in the entrepreneurial world? And I think, every successful business person has failed, but they've learned from those failures and they haven't taken them as knockbacks. They've taken them as opportunities.
Yeah, I would probably disagree with you slightly on that and say that they've taken them as the failures, but I don't think everybody does. I think a lot of people get knocked back by that, and that's a lot easier to, or that happens perhaps a lot easier as you're younger. As you become older and wiser, you realise it's part of the journey. I think the important thing with failure in business and trying things is not to normalise failure. I think it's to take ownership of the failure, to recognise that you can't keep failing. At some stage, you've got to turn that failure into
yes,
success.
okay. So the caveat would be that continual failure probably says that there's something wrong with the process, doesn't it?
Endemically wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where leadership comes into that, is to give the confidence to go and try, but to try to fail. And in fact, also to some extent, setting something up to fail on the basis that it might actually prove you wrong. Because if you think it's going to fail and it doesn't, then it starts to challenge you in an opposite direction. And certainly we do a lot of that in R&D. We test things in the thought that they're going to fail. And every now and again, we get the little scratch on the head. We go, actually, that hasn't done what we expected it to do. So hang on, let's now investigate that a bit further. And it's having the confidence to do that, I think. But importantly, it's empowering others, maybe those not in leadership roles, to have the confidence to do that and have the confidence to suggest it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So sadly, we're coming to the end of the podcast. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. I just wanted to touch upon you as a person. So you've got a very interesting background, haven't you? So I think you crossed over from a very successful sporting career. If I'm not mistaken, you played for Wycombe Wanderers.
Yeah, I played at Wycombe as a pretty average player, I have to say, but back in the days. But I wouldn't necessarily say it was a sporting career, because I'd always taken the view that I wanted to be in business. But the ability with non-league football, as it was at that time, that you could do both, and indeed that's exactly why.
And then I think you've had some interesting roles, haven't you, in sort of governance in or organisation within the sporting world. So I suppose just sort of. And maybe we can come back to this in another podcast, because I think the whole question around the crossover between sport and business is a fascinating one. But just sort of one last question for you is, what's something that you've taken from your sporting endeavours, either playing or on the organisational side, into the business world, which is something that you can sort of share with the listeners that's perhaps made a big difference?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the key point from a coaching perspective, I'm a coach educator and a qualified coach, and you have to deal with the unknown. It's the unpredictability of sport, the randomness of gameplay, and the randomness of business. The fact that there will always be a banana skin that comes in, and you've got to be able to think on your feet. You've got to adapt to change. The fact that your game plan, your strategy may not go the way you expected it to go. And that was certainly the case with us in terms of our exporting strategy. We had to rethink that from pre-COVID to post-COVID, and it's been an amazing success since post-COVID. But it was acknowledging, going back to that point about failures, going back to the point about being bold and courageous to make a change, to understand where you need to make change, but where you need to manage personnel in order to make that change. The big anomaly in the sporting world that always surprises me is that you take players, you take ex-players, they become coaches, they become managers, but actually they've never managed anybody throughout their whole career where they're deemed to be successful. It's a different world altogether.
Yeah.
And I think that if you reverse it round from business into sports world and coaching, it's about, back to the point again that you very adeptly made, it's about people. It's about how you manage people. How do you manage people to get the right outcomes? Not necessarily, and this is a changing world in sporting context, but not so much about what you want the individual to do to get success, but how the individual might then see how they can contribute to get everybody the success.
Yeah.
And there's a massive crossover, massive crossover.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a fascinating area and one that we should return to, but not today because we've run out of time, unfortunately. So, Graeme, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Many congratulations on all your success. You're a real shining star within the Buckinghamshire business community, and a great example for many businesses. So, thank you. So thank you for listening, everybody. I've been in conversation with Graeme Dell from Cableflow, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Michael.